Hi, I'm Caroline, and this is the story of the night I realized blood doesn't always mean family. It was late, the kind of late when the world feels muffled and still, when even the streetlights look tired. My apartment was quiet. A kettle hissed softly on the stove, filling the kitchen with the faint smell of chamomile. I'd been planning to settle into a puzzle, maybe watch an old movie. It was supposed to be one of those simple, uneventful nights. But the call changed everything. The night my own brother locked my cousin Julia and her 2 little girls outside in a freezing storm, he called her a failure and slammed the door shut. No coat, no shoes, just rain hammering down on the roof, wind slicing through the trees, and betrayal so sharp it could cut through bone. Julia had made mistakes, sure. But what they did wasn't discipline. It wasn't tough love. It was cruelty. And when my phone lit up with that voicemail, when I heard the ragged voice of my nephew breaking through the static, I knew the line between silence and action had vanished. "Aunt Caroline, please." They made Mom leave. We're outside. It's so cold. His voice cracked halfway through, swallowed by the roar of rain hitting whatever thin shelter they had. I swear I could hear his little sister coughing in the background, the sound jagged and weak. For a moment, I just stood there, the ladle still in my hand, my soup simmering on the stove. I wanted to believe I misheard, that surely, no matter how heartless my brother could be, he wouldn't go this far. But denial is a fragile shield, and that voicemail shattered mine. I pressed the phone to my ear again, playing the message a second time, hoping I'd find something I missed, some clue that this wasn't real. But no, the words were clear. They made Mom leave. I could feel my heartbeat pounding in my throat, the kind of pounding that isn't from fear but from something older, deeper. The recognition of a truth you wish weren't real. My brother, the same man who gave a speech at Thanksgiving about family values and honor, had just left his own cousin and her children to fend for themselves in a storm. I dialed back immediately, once, twice, 3 times. No answer. The ringing felt endless, cruel, like the world itself was mocking me for hoping someone decent would pick up. And then, that old voice in my head, the one I'd tried to bury over the years, rose up again. The voice that always whispered when things went wrong in my family, "Move. Don't wait for them to do the right thing. They never will." So I did. I yanked the pot off the stove, soup forgotten. I shoved 2 heavy blankets into a bag, filled a thermos with hot cocoa, and pulled my boots from the closet. My coat still smelled faintly of smoke from last winter's fireplace, but I didn't care. I needed speed, not comfort. As I was leaving, my eyes caught on the corner of my closet shelf. Folded neatly was the rain jacket my grandmother had given me years ago, back when storms terrified me as a child. She had pressed it into my hands and said, "This will keep you safe." At the time, it felt like nothing more than fabric. But now, as I grabbed it and shoved it into the car, it felt like something else. A shield, a promise. Outside, the rain was vicious. Sheets of water blurred the streetlights, and the wind howled like an animal caught in its own trap. My car door groaned when I slammed it shut, water already dripping through the rubber lining. My hands trembled as I turned the key, but the engine roared awake. 6 hours through the storm. 6 hours of uncertainty. But I didn't think twice. Julia was family, and not in the way people like to boast about at holiday dinners. She was family in the truest sense. Messy, imperfect, sometimes reckless, but always human. And humans don't deserve to be thrown out like trash. As I pulled onto the highway, I couldn't shake the images from my mind. Julia standing in the rain, her hair plastered to her face, her daughters clinging to her legs, crying from the cold. I imagined the look in my brother's eyes when he slammed that door shut. Cold, dismissive, final. The windshield wipers squealed, struggling to keep up with the downpour, My headlights caught nothing but gray sheets of rain. The road ahead felt endless, but my focus narrowed into one thought. Get there. Just get there. And as I drove, my mind betrayed me with memories I thought I had buried. I was 10 years old again, standing outside my school after choir practice. The sky had opened up into a storm, rain soaking through my thin jacket. One by one, other kids were picked up, their parents' cars pulling away into the night. But mine never came. 2 hours I waited. When I finally got home, my parents just shrugged. We were busy. Busy at my brother's soccer game, busy with appearances, busy with everything but me. The chill from that night still lived somewhere deep in my bones. The feeling of being forgotten, unwanted, disposable. And now Julia was living that same moment, only worse, because she had children who were depending on her. And the people who should have sheltered her, who should have sheltered them, had chosen cruelty instead. The rain battered harder against the car. My hands ached from gripping the wheel. My chest tightened with every mile. But underneath the fear was something else. Resolve. I wasn't that 10-year-old girl anymore. I wasn't powerless. Not tonight. When my phone buzzed again, I nearly swerved from the shock. Another voicemail. My nephew's voice. Smaller this time, cracked with cold. Aunt Caroline. Mommy's shivering. My sister won't stop coughing. Please hurry. Tears blurred my vision, and I blinked hard, forcing myself to focus on the road. Hold on, baby, I whispered, though he couldn't hear me. Hold on, I'm coming. The storm didn't let up, but neither did I, because sometimes family isn't who shares your blood, it's who answers the call. And that night, I was the only one left to answer. The road stretched endlessly, slick with rain that turned every mile into a gamble. My wipers thrashed back and forth, but it felt like I was staring through a waterfall. Trucks roared past in the opposite lane, throwing waves of muddy water onto my windshield, each splash a blindfold that lasted too long. My knuckles were white around the steering wheel. 6 hours across Ohio. 6 hours of storm and silence. But it wasn't quiet in my mind. With every mile, memories pushed their way in. Julia laughing in the kitchen when we were younger, sneaking me cookies before dinner. Julia crying on the phone last year after her husband walked out, telling me she didn't know how she was going to make it. Julia at Thanksgiving, sitting across the table with bruises under her makeup, while my brother scolded her for being a disappointment. I had said nothing then. I just passed the mashed potatoes and pretended not to notice. But tonight was different. Tonight's silence would cost lives. The rain turned heavier the closer I got. It hammered against the car like fists, rattling the doors, drowning out even the sound of my own thoughts. I leaned forward over the wheel, squinting into the gray blur. Around midnight, near a stretch of farmland, a semi-truck skidded into my lane. I yanked the wheel, tires screeching as the car slid sideways. For a breathless second, I thought I was gone, that I'd slam into the guardrail and never make it to Julia. But somehow the car steadied, fishtailed back into control. My heart pounded so hard I felt it in my ears. I pulled over, chest heaving, palms sweaty on the wheel. The storm didn't care if I stopped, though. Rain pummeled the roof and the wind rocked the car like a toy. I closed my eyes and whispered, "Please, please let me get there." Then my phone buzzed again. Another voicemail. This time it was Julia's voice. Weak, broken. He pushed us out, said I wasn't family anymore. The girls are crying. It's so cold. Her words dissolved into coughing, a thud, and then a man's voice in the background, my brother's voice. "Get off my property." You made your choice and then nothing but static. I wanted to scream. I wanted to drive faster, to somehow bend time and arrive that second. But all I could do was grip the wheel tighter and push forward. The storm swallowed the world whole. Visibility was a few yards at best. My headlights carved tunnels through the downpour, but beyond that, just blackness. Each mile felt like a battle I had no choice but to win. Finally, sometime before dawn, I turned down the narrow gravel road that led to the old farmhouse. The mailbox leaned under the weight of water, the numbers half peeled away. I knew this place too well. It had been the backdrop of our childhood holidays, our photo albums, our carefully rehearsed family image. But tonight, the glow of the porch light looked sinister. Familiar walls had turned hostile. My boots sank into the mud when I stepped out. Cold rain slapped against my face, soaking me instantly. I shouted, "Julia!" But the storm swallowed my voice. Then I saw it. A lump near the barn, half hidden beneath the broken awning. For a moment, my brain refused to process what I was seeing. Just shadows and fabric, I told myself. But then a cough cut through the rain. A small, hacking cough that didn't belong in the night. I ran. My boots slipped in the mud, my hands burning as I scraped against the wet wood of the barn. And there she was, Julia, huddled on the ground, arms wrapped around her daughters, her hair plastered to her cheeks, her lips trembling, her eyes half shut. The girls pressed tight against her, one coughing so hard her whole body shook, the other whimpering, "It's cold, Mommy." "It's cold." I dropped to my knees. "Oh, God, Julia, it's me. It's Caroline." Her eyes fluttered open, unfocused, but she whispered my name. That was all I needed. I pulled the blankets from my bag, wrapping them around the girls first, then around Julia. My hands were clumsy, shaking too much to tie the knots right, but it didn't matter. Warmth. They needed warmth. "Come on," I said, my voice breaking. "I've got you." "I've got all of you." I lifted the older girl into my arms. She felt so light it scared me. Julia stumbled when I tried to help her up, but she leaned against me, teeth chattering. Together we staggered to the car, rain beating against us like it wanted to shove us back down. Inside, the heater roared. I shoved the thermos into Julia's hands. "Drink, slowly, keep sipping." I rubbed the girls' arms, their tiny hands icy in mine. Through the windshield, I caught movement. The curtain in the farmhouse shifted. A shadow stood at the window, watching us. My chest tightened. He was inside, dry, warm, drinking coffee maybe, watching his own family suffer outside. I couldn't hold it in. I stumbled out into the rain and screamed, my voice raw. "Are you serious? She's your cousin. They're children. You left them to die out here." The curtain twitched. A pause. And then the sound of the door slamming shut. That sound was louder than the storm. I stood there, shaking, rain plastering my hair to my face, rage boiling in my chest. And in that moment, I realized something I'd been denying for years. My brother wasn't cruel by accident. He wasn't lost or misguided or just strict. He was deliberate, calculated. He cared more about control than compassion. And if that control meant throwing his own blood into the storm, he would. I got back into the car, jaw clenched, heart hammering. Julia's eyes flicked to mine, full of exhaustion but also fear. She didn't have to ask the question. I answered it anyway. "They'll never touch you again. Not you, not the girls, not while I'm here." I turned the key, the engine roared, and we pulled away from the farmhouse. My brother's porch light glowed in the rearview mirror until the rain swallowed it whole. On the highway, Julia dozed, her head lolling against the window, the girls huddled under the blankets. Every few minutes I glanced back, checking their breathing, whispering to myself that they'd be okay. But deep down, I knew this wasn't over. Because storms don't end just because you survive the night. Some storms follow you into daylight, into courtrooms, into the places where truth has to fight to be heard. Still, as the miles rolled by and the farmhouse disappeared behind me, one thing was certain. Julia and the girls were alive. And no matter what came next, I had kept that promise. Because sometimes, family isn't who shares your blood. Family is who shows up in the storm. The hospital lights were too bright. That harsh, sterile white that made everything feel colder instead of warmer. As soon as I pulled up to the emergency entrance, nurses rushed forward, pulling Julia and the girls out of the car. They moved quickly, practiced, but I could see the flicker of alarm in their faces when they felt how icy the children were. I ran inside behind them, my clothes dripping rainwater onto the linoleum floor. My breath came fast, like I was still out in the storm. A doctor bent over Julia's youngest, placing a stethoscope against her tiny chest. She's struggling to breathe. Get oxygen. Now I wanted to stay calm, to be strong, but panic gnawed at me. What if I was too late? What if all my driving, all my promises, meant nothing? I pressed my palm against the window of the treatment room, watching the girl's small chest rise and fall, shallow and ragged. Minutes passed, like hours. Then the doctor stepped out, his voice steady. She's stable, for now. Another hour out there, and her lungs might have collapsed. You brought them just in time. Relief hit me so hard I nearly collapsed into the nearest chair. I whispered, "Thank you," though I wasn't sure if I was speaking to him, to God, or just to the storm for letting me through. But relief never lasts long in my family. 2 women in navy cardigans walked into the waiting room, clipboards in hand. They looked official, calm, and utterly out of place in the chaos of the ER. One of them scanned the room and asked, "Caroline Morgan?" I stood slowly. "Yes?" She flashed her badge. "We're with Child and Family Services. We received a report that you abducted 2 minor children without permission." For a moment, I thought I misheard. "Abducted?" My voice cracked. "Those are Julia's daughters." I pulled them out of the rain. They would have died. The woman's face was polite but unmoved, like she had heard every excuse before. The report came from the children's guardians at the residence. They stated you removed the minors without consent. Guardians. My brother. My blood. Rage and disbelief tangled in my chest. They threw them out. I have the voicemail. My nephew called me crying. Do you want to hear it? My hands fumbled for my phone. The social worker nodded but kept writing notes. We'll need to verify everything. For now, we need to speak with Miss Julia directly. She's barely conscious, I snapped. She can't even sit up right now. And you want to grill her like a criminal? The woman's expression didn't change. It's procedure. That word, procedure, felt like a knife. It meant rules mattered more than reality. It meant my brother's lies already had weight, and my truth was just noise until proven otherwise. Hours bled into morning. Julia was admitted, her daughters tucked into pediatric beds with warm blankets and IV fluids. I sat in the waiting room, sipping a paper cup of lukewarm coffee that didn't taste like anything. Every time the doors opened, I flinched, expecting to see my brother walk in with another accusation. Instead, a police officer appeared, tall, unreadable, a thin folder under his arm. "Ma'am, we need to ask you a few questions." I followed him into a small interview room, the kind with gray walls and a 2-sided mirror. He opened the folder and said, "The report claims you acted erratically, removed the children without warning, and may have a history of instability. Is that correct?" I laughed once, bitter and sharp. Instability? The only unstable thing here is leaving children in a storm. Ask the doctors. Ask Julia when she wakes up. I didn't abduct anyone. I rescued them. The officer raised an eyebrow but kept writing. Your mother mentioned an incident during your college years. Emotional distress. Do you want to comment on that? My stomach twisted. That was supposed to be private. Something I had told my mother in confidence when I was 20 and barely holding it together after a breakup. And now she was using it as ammunition. I pressed my palms flat on the cold table. Do I look unstable to you right now? I drove through a storm to save 3 lives. If that's unstable, then maybe the world's upside down. He didn't answer, just wrote another note. When he finally dismissed me, I stumbled back into the hallway, drained. Julia was awake now, pale but alert. She reached for my hand and whispered, "They're trying to take the girls, aren't they?" I nodded, unable to sugarcoat it. They filed a report. They want custody. Tears welled in her eyes, but she didn't look surprised. They already tried once. Last month. Filed a petition saying I was unfit, said the divorce made me irrational. She swallowed hard. They don't care about me. They just want control. Her words lit something inside me, a fire I hadn't felt before, because she was right. This wasn't about love, it was about power. And my family had always been masters at rewriting stories to protect their image. I stepped into the hallway, pulled out my phone, and dialed a number I hadn't called in years. My old college roommate, now a lawyer. "Annalise," I said when she answered, "I need your help." "Family law. It's ugly." She didn't hesitate. "Tell me everything." So I did. The storm, the barn, the hospital, the lies. By the time I finished, my hands were shaking. Annalise's voice, steady as stone, replied, "We'll fight. But you need to be ready. This won't be quick." And she was right. Weeks turned into months. Courtrooms replaced hospital corridors. My brother and his wife arrived each time in pressed suits, faces composed, telling the judge they were the real victims, that Julia was unstable, that I was reckless, that the children needed structure. They spoke about family values as if those words weren't stained by what they had done. But we had evidence. The voicemails, the medical reports, even a neighbor who had seen Julia standing outside that night, soaked to the bone, children crying at her side. Piece by piece, their story cracked. Still, it was exhausting. Every hearing drained us. Every motion delayed the truth. Julia grew thinner, her shoulders slumping under the weight of constant attacks. The girls had nightmares, waking up screaming about rain. And me, I carried anger like armor, but inside I was tired. So tired of fighting blood that should have been a safety net, not a noose. Then came the turning point. Our lawyer uncovered an old clause in the family trust. If any relative was declared unfit, guardianship and control passed not to the parents, but to the next blood relative with full-time care, which meant me. The day that document hit the courtroom, the air shifted. My brother's confident smirk faltered. My mother's hand tightened on her pearls. For the first time, they realized their plan might backfire. And it did. The judge ruled that custody remained with Julia. Temporary guardianship powers extended to me for emergencies. And as for my brother's petition, denied. When we walked out of that courthouse, Julia held her daughters close, her eyes wet with relief. For the first time in months, she looked lighter, free. I looked back once, just long enough to see my brother's face harden with fury, but I didn't flinch. Not anymore. Because storms don't just reveal who people are. They reveal who refuses to drown. 6 months passed. The storm outside faded, but the storm inside took longer to calm. Life didn't snap back to normal overnight. Court rulings might close cases, but they don't erase scars. Julia and the girls moved into a small rental apartment across town. The place was nothing glamorous. 2 bedrooms, peeling wallpaper in the kitchen, and a heater that rattled louder than it warmed. But it was safe. And safety was something we hadn't had in a long time. I helped her paint the walls pale blue. The color, she said, reminded her of calm seas. We set up bunk beds for the girls, lined with mismatched sheets I found at a thrift store. They didn't care. To them, it was an adventure. Their own space. Their own fresh start. But healing is never linear. Some nights, Julia would wake gasping, her hands gripping the blanket like she was still out there under the barn awning, fighting the rain. Other nights, the girls woke crying, convinced they could hear their grandfather's voice booming through the walls. Trauma doesn't leave just because you lock the door. It lingers, waiting in shadows. I knew that feeling. I carried it too. I'd wake at 3 a.m., heart pounding, seeing flashes of headlights swerving across wet asphalt. I'd hear my brother's voice in my head, "She's not family anymore," and feel anger rise like bile. but slowly, piece by piece, we found ways to live again. Sunday mornings, we'd cook pancakes in the cramped kitchen, the smell of syrup chasing away shadows. Julia hummed while pouring cereal, her voice shaky at first, but steadier with each week. The girls filled the apartment with drawings, scribbled rainbows, stick figures holding hands, and more often than not, a little square house with the words, "Our home," written across the roof. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours. Meanwhile, the weight shifted back onto my parents and my brother. Word spread in the community. People may not know every detail, but whispers travel faster than facts. Former friends avoided them at church. The local nonprofit they ran quietly lost donors. Invitations stopped arriving. Reputation is fragile. Built slowly, shattered suddenly. They weren't arrested. There were no handcuffs, no headlines, just silence. A slow, heavy silence as the world turned its back, and maybe that was the truest punishment of all. One afternoon, I stopped by Julia's apartment with groceries. The girls rushed to the door, hugging me so tightly I nearly dropped the bags. Julia smiled, tired but real. On the wall above the dining table, she'd hung a small shadow box. Inside it was the rain jacket I had worn that night, folded carefully, still faintly stained at the cuffs. "You kept it?" I asked. She nodded. "It saved us." "You saved us," I swallowed hard, unsure if I deserved the credit. It wasn't me. It was just doing what anyone should have done. Her eyes softened. "Not everyone would have. You did that night." I sat in my own apartment staring at the same storm jacket now immortalized on Julia's wall. And I realized something. My whole life I had been waiting for my family to choose me, waiting for them to see me, to care, to love without conditions. But that night in the rain proved what I should have known all along. Love is not a performance. Love is action. My parents didn't lose because I fought harder. They lost because they chose fear and control over compassion. They lost because they rewrote loyalty into silence, and silence eventually collapses under its own weight. Weeks later, Julia asked me, "Do you ever wonder if they regret it?" I thought about it. The way my mother clutched her pearls at every church event, the way my brother puffed himself up about family honor, the way my father's words always cut sharper than knives. Did they regret losing us? No, I said finally. I think they regret losing control, not losing us. Julia nodded, her eyes fixed on the children playing on the floor. Then let them keep their control. We'll keep each other, and that was enough. Spring came. The girls ran through the park chasing dandelions, their laughter mixing with birdsong. Julia sat on the bench beside me, her face turned toward the sun. For the first time in years, she didn't look like she was waiting for something bad to happen. She looked like someone learning how to breathe again. I thought back to the storm, the barn, the hospital, the courtroom. Every step had felt like walking through fire. But on that park bench, watching the children laugh, I finally understood. The fire hadn't destroyed us. It had burned away the illusion of family that never truly existed. And in its place, it left something stronger, truth. And truth, once chosen, is a kind of freedom. As the sun dipped behind the trees, Julia turned to me and whispered, "You ever regret it? All the fights? All the nights you stayed up worrying?" I breathed in deeply, felt the air move steady through my chest. No, not for a second. Because sometimes doing what's right costs you everything you thought you wanted, but it gives you the one thing you can live with: peace. She smiled, and in that moment, I knew we were going to be okay. The storm had taken so much from us, but it had also given us clarity. Family isn't who shares your blood. Family is who shows up in the rain, who stays when it's hard, who holds you up when the world wants to push you down. And if I had to do it all over again, I would. Every mile, every tear, every fight. Because walking into that storm wasn't just about saving Julia. It was about saving myself. From silence, from fear, from the lie that loyalty means letting cruelty win. The rain may return someday. Storms always do. But now I know this. I won't face them alone. And neither will she. Time has a way of softening storms. The thunder fades, the rain dries, the mud hardens into cracks in the road. But inside, the echoes last longer. Even after Julia and the girls had found safety, even after the judge's gavel came down in our favor, I kept replaying those nights. The storm, the courtroom, the shouting, the silence. I wondered why betrayal from family cuts deeper than from anyone else. Maybe because we're taught from the beginning that family is forever, that blood is unbreakable, that home is safe. So when the people who are supposed to love you the most turn their backs, it feels like the ground itself has betrayed you. For months, I carried that weight. I kept asking myself the same question. How could they? How could my brother, the boy I once played hide and seek with in those same farmhouse fields, grow into a man who slammed a door on children, shivering in the rain? How could my mother, who once held me through my nightmares, weaponize my past struggles to paint me unstable? How could my father, who taught me to ride a bike, sit in silence while cruelty unfolded under his roof? The answer didn't come all at once. But slowly I realized, people show you who they are when the storm comes. Some step up, others step away. My brother chose power. My parents chose silence. And I chose to act. And that choice changed me. I used to shrink myself, hoping if I stayed small enough, quiet enough, they would finally see me as worthy. I thought loyalty meant swallowing pain, excusing harm, staying no matter what. But storms teach you things sunshine never will. I learned that loyalty without love is just bondage. I learned that silence is a form of betrayal, too. And I learned that sometimes you have to build your own family out of the ashes of the one that broke you. Julia taught me that. One evening, weeks after the final hearing, she sat across from me at her kitchen table. The girls were asleep, their soft breathing filling the small apartment with peace. Julia held her mug of tea with both hands and whispered, "Do you ever wonder if we'll stop feeling like survivors and just feel normal again?" I thought about it. Maybe normal isn't the goal, I said. Maybe it's about building something better than normal. She looked at me for a long time before smiling. Better than normal. I like that. Better than normal meant laughter that wasn't forced. It meant holidays without fear of judgment. It meant the girls running barefoot in the park without worrying about mud on their clothes. It meant Julia painting again, colors spilling across canvases like pieces of herself returning. And for me, better than normal meant peace. Real peace. The kind that comes when you stop chasing approval and start living in truth. Of course, not everything tied up neatly. My parents never apologized. My brother never called. At first, that silence felt like an open wound. But over time, I realized it was a gift. Distance can be painful, but it can also be healing. The less I heard from them, the more I heard myself. One day, the girls asked me why they didn't visit their grandparents anymore. I took a deep breath and told them the truth, in words small enough for them to hold. Sometimes, people who are supposed to protect us make bad choices. And when they do, we have to keep ourselves safe. But you are loved, always, by me, by your mom, by each other. They nodded, serious beyond their years, and then the younger one climbed into my lap and whispered, "You showed up." 2 simple words, but they were everything. Because in the end, that's what matters. Not titles, not bloodlines, not appearances. Showing up. I think about that night often, the storm pounding on the roof of the barn. I think about my boots sinking into the mud, my voice hoarse from screaming at a window that would never open. I think about the weight of the little girl in my arms, lighter than she should have been, colder than she should have been. and I think about how close I came to doing nothing, about how easy it would have been to stay home, to tell myself it wasn't my place, that someone else would step in. But no one else did. That's the truth about storms. They reveal who shows up and who doesn't. And maybe that's the lesson I needed to learn all along. That family isn't defined by who shares your name. Family is defined by who shows up when the rain falls hardest. So if you're listening to this and you've ever been betrayed by the people who were supposed to love you most, hear me when I say, you are not alone, you are not crazy, and you are not unworthy of love. You may not get to choose the family you're born into, but you can choose the family you build. You can choose the people who show up, the ones who hold the flashlight when the storm knocks out the power, the ones who drive through the night just to get to you. And if you can't find them yet, hold on. Keep the door open for those who will come, because someone will. And when they do, you'll know the difference between blood and love. As for me, the storm changed everything. It broke the illusion of what family meant in my parents' house, but it gave me something real in return. A bond forged not by blood, but by choice, by sacrifice, by love in its purest form. Sometimes I still hear the rain in my dreams. Sometimes I wake up gasping, reaching for my phone like I'm waiting for another voicemail from a child's trembling voice. But then I hear laughter from Julia's apartment next door, or I see the girls' drawings taped to my fridge, and I know the storm didn't win. We did. And maybe that's the greatest lesson of all. Storms will come, but they don't last forever. And when the clouds finally break, when the sun returns, you'll see who walked beside you through the flood and who stayed dry behind closed doors. And once you know that, you'll never mistake one for the other again. So if this story has taught us anything, it's this. Storms don't just test us. They reveal us. Julia and her girls survived, not because blood protected them, but because love showed up. That night proved that family isn't about titles. It's about action, compassion, and courage. And now I want you to ask yourself, who showed up for you in your hardest storm? Share it in the comments, because your story might be the light someone else needs tonight. And remember, you don't need anyone's permission to protect what belongs to you. Your truth matters. Your voice matters. And your story deserves to be heard. So if this message resonated with you, like, subscribe, and share to help bring more quiet but powerful stories to light. Because in the end, no matter how loud the lies may be, the truth always finds its way back.